She'd been cleaning animal enclosures at Riverside Zoo for 8 years, hosing down cages, scrubbing feeding areas, hauling wheelbarrows of hay and waste. Just another elderly woman with a mop and bucket earning minimum wage. Until a mysterious disease started killing the zoo's animals, and suddenly, the quiet custodian revealed why she noticed symptoms the veterinary staff had missed. Dorothy Sullivan was 73 years old, with silver-gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and kind blue eyes that crinkled at the corners from decades of smiling at both animals and people. Her small frame was deceptively strong from years of physical labor, and her weathered hands bore permanent stains from cleaning chemicals and animal feed that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we continue this powerful tale of hidden expertise and life-saving dedication, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories about invisible heroes deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. Riverside Zoo sprawled across 120 acres on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, home to over 2,000 animals representing 300 species from around the world. The facility was renowned for its conservation programs, breeding endangered species, and educational initiatives that connected urban families with wildlife they might never otherwise encounter. Dorothy had worked there for 8 years, hired as part of the custodial staff during budget cuts that eliminated higher-paid positions while maintaining essential cleaning services. She arrived every morning at 6 a.m., 2 hours before the zoo opened to visitors, and spent her days maintaining the habitats that housed everything from prairie dogs to Siberian tigers. Her routine was methodical and comprehensive. Start with the small mammal exhibits, move through the primate enclosures, clean the big cat areas during their morning feeding, finish with the bird aviaries and reptile houses. 10 hours of physical labor that left her exhausted but satisfied, knowing that her work contributed to animal welfare, even if nobody noticed her contribution. The zoo staff treated Dorothy with the respectful kindness reserved for reliable service workers. Zookeepers appreciated that animal enclosures were always spotless when they arrived for morning rounds. Veterinary technicians knew they could count on her to report unusual observations about animal behavior or health. Administrators valued her perfect attendance and willingness to work overtime during busy seasons. But none of them knew Dorothy's background beyond her employment application, which listed 8 years of custodial experience and references from previous cleaning jobs. Dorothy lived alone in a small house 20 minutes from the zoo, a modest 2-bedroom structure she'd purchased with savings accumulated over decades of frugal living. The exterior was unremarkable, standard suburban architecture with a well-maintained garden where she grew vegetables and flowers that attracted butterflies and songbirds. The interior told a different story entirely. The walls were covered with professional photographs of animals she'd worked with during another life. African elephants in their natural habitat, endangered tigers in rehabilitation centers, primates being prepared for reintroduction to the wild. Bookshelves held veterinary textbooks spanning 40 years of evolution in animal medicine, research journals focusing on wildlife diseases, and technical manuals for diagnostic equipment most people had never seen. And in a cedar chest that she rarely opened were items from a career that had defined her adult life. Diplomas from Cornell University's College of Veterinary Medicine, board certifications in exotic animal medicine and wildlife pathology, and awards from international conservation organizations recognizing contributions that had saved entire species from extinction. Dr. Dorothy Sullivan, VDM, PhD in wildlife pathology. 41 years as a veterinarian specializing in exotic animals, zoo medicine, and disease prevention in captive wildlife populations. Her expertise had taken her to every continent, working with governments and conservation groups to establish veterinary protocols that protected endangered species while advancing scientific understanding of animal health. The career had been everything Dorothy dreamed of during veterinary school. Challenging cases that required innovative solutions, research that contributed to global conservation efforts, and the satisfaction of work that made a measurable difference in preventing species extinctions. But forced retirement at 65 due to corporate restructuring ended her access to the animals and meaningful work that had given her life purpose. Zoo consulting positions went to younger veterinarians with current technology experience. Private practice focused on dogs and cats rather than the exotic species that had been her specialty. The custodial job at Riverside Zoo was meant to provide basic income and health insurance while keeping her connected to the animal world she couldn't abandon. 8 years later, temporary employment had become permanent when Dorothy discovered that staying busy with physical work helped combat the depression that followed losing her professional identity. But the job also allowed her to continue observing animals with eyes trained by 40 years of veterinary experience. Walking through exhibits where world-class zoological care continued, monitoring animals whose health and behavior reflected the expertise of younger professionals, maintaining the spaces where conservation work might save species from extinction. Dorothy's veterinary training never disappeared, even when she was officially just a cleaning woman. She noticed subtle changes in animal behavior that indicated illness before symptoms became obvious. She recognized signs of stress, nutritional deficiency, and environmental problems that could affect animal welfare. Her observations were always couched as casual comments to zookeepers who had no idea they were receiving professional consultations disguised as custodial small talk. That female macaque in enclosure 7 seems a little listless today. Might want to keep an eye on her appetite. The big male lion's been favoring his right front paw. Probably nothing, but thought you should know. These suggestions were invariably accurate, leading to early intervention that prevented minor issues from becoming serious health problems. Thursday, October 18th began like every other morning. Dorothy arrived at 5:50 a.m., changed into her work clothes in the custodial office, and loaded her cart with cleaning supplies, fresh bedding materials, and the specialized disinfectants required for different animal species. The small mammal exhibits were routine: prairie dogs, meerkats, and otters that showed normal activity levels and healthy appetites during morning feeding. Dorothy completed that section by 8 a.m. and moved to the primate enclosures, where her favorite animals lived in habitats designed to replicate their natural environments. At 8:30 a.m., while cleaning the viewing area for the spider monkey exhibit, Dorothy noticed something that triggered every instinct developed over 41 years of veterinary practice. 3 of the spider monkeys were displaying subtle behavioral changes that wouldn't be obvious to untrained observers but were unmistakable to someone with her background. Reduced activity levels, slightly altered grooming patterns, and social interactions that deviated from normal troop dynamics. Individual symptoms might be attributed to various factors, weather changes, dietary variations, or social stress, but seeing them simultaneously in multiple animals suggested something more concerning: the early stages of infectious disease transmission. Dorothy completed her cleaning routine, but made mental notes about every detail she'd observed. Veterinary training had taught her to trust pattern recognition developed through decades of experience with animal populations. At 10 a.m., while cleaning the great ape exhibit, her concerns escalated. 2 of the orangutans showed similar subtle changes: reduced appetite evidenced by uneaten fruit in their enclosure, slightly altered breathing patterns, and behavioral changes that suggested mild respiratory distress. Dorothy had seen these symptom combinations before, during outbreaks of viral diseases that could devastate captive primate populations if not identified and contained quickly. She needed to report her observations to the veterinary staff, but recommendations from a custodial worker carried limited weight with professionals who measured expertise by degrees rather than experience. Dorothy tried the careful approach first. "Dr. Peterson, I noticed some of the spider monkeys seemed a little off this morning. Thought you might want to take a look." Dr. Peterson was 34 years old, recently hired as the zoo's associate veterinarian, with excellent credentials from veterinary school, but limited experience with the subtle signs of disease transmission in captive primate populations. "Dorothy, I appreciate you keeping an eye on things, but we do daily health assessments on all our animals. If there were any problems, we'd spot them during our professional examinations. I understand, doctor, but I've been working with these animals for 8 years, and I'm seeing behavioral changes that might indicate— Dorothy, you're very dedicated, but animal behavior assessment requires veterinary training. I'm sure whatever you're noticing isn't medically significant. Dismissed and frustrated, Dorothy returned to her cleaning duties. But 41 years of veterinary experience screamed warnings that professional hierarchy and institutional politics couldn't silence. By noon, her fears were confirmed. While cleaning the lemur exhibit, Dorothy observed identical symptom patterns in 3 ring-tailed lemurs. The same subtle respiratory changes, reduced social interaction, and behavioral modifications that indicated early-stage viral infection.
Dr. Dorothy Sullivan recognized the clinical picture immediately. This was the beginning of a viral outbreak that could spread through the zoo's entire primate population within days. Without immediate intervention, dozens of endangered animals could die from a disease that was completely preventable with proper veterinary protocols. At 1 p.m., Dorothy made a decision that would define the remainder of her life. She walked into the zoo's veterinary clinic, still wearing her custodial uniform, but carrying herself with the authority of someone who had spent 4 decades saving animal lives. Dr. Peterson, we need to implement immediate quarantine protocols for all primate exhibits. I'm observing early symptoms of viral respiratory disease that's already affecting multiple species. Dr. Peterson looked up from his paperwork, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Dorothy, I've told you that medical decisions require professional training. You can't diagnose diseases based on casual observations. Dorothy looked at him for a long moment, then reached into her pocket and placed something on his desk that changed everything. A veterinary license from the state of Oregon, current and valid, bearing the name Dr. Dorothy May Sullivan, DVM. Doctor, my name is Dorothy Sullivan. I hold a doctorate in veterinary medicine from Cornell University and a PhD in wildlife pathology from UC Davis. I've spent 41 years specializing in exotic animal medicine and zoo veterinary care. Dr. Peterson stared at the license, then at Dorothy, then back at the license. I've been working as your custodial staff for 8 years, but I'm also a board-certified veterinarian with more experience in captive primate medicine than anyone currently employed by this facility. And I'm telling you that we have approximately 6 hours to contain a viral outbreak that could kill every primate in this zoo. The transformation was instantaneous. The elderly cleaning woman disappeared, replaced by a veterinary professional with 4 decades of expertise in exactly these situations. The symptoms I'm observing indicate a respiratory virus, probably paramyxovirus, that's highly contagious among primate species. We need immediate quarantine, sample collection for laboratory analysis, and prophylactic treatment protocols for all potentially exposed animals. Dr. Peterson sat in stunned silence as Dorothy continued with the clinical precision that had made her legendary among veterinarians worldwide. I recommend initiating Code Orange quarantine procedures, contact isolation for all primate exhibits, and emergency consultation with the Regional Veterinary Pathology Laboratory. This outbreak is containable if we act within the next few hours. Within 30 minutes, Riverside Zoo had activated emergency disease protocols that hadn't been used in over a decade. Dorothy worked alongside the veterinary staff with professional competence that made it clear she wasn't just helping, she was leading the response to a crisis that could have destroyed 40 years of conservation work. Laboratory results confirmed her diagnosis within 24 hours. Paramyxovirus, exactly as she'd predicted, in the early stages of transmission that would have become catastrophic without immediate intervention. Dr. Sullivan, the zoo director said during the emergency meeting, how long have you been working here as custodial staff? Dorothy adjusted her work uniform, her weathered hands steady despite the day's stress. 8 years, sir, since my forced retirement from active veterinary practice. Why didn't you tell us who you were? Dorothy looked around the conference room, filled with younger professionals who had treated her as invisible service personnel for nearly a decade. Because I was hired to clean animal enclosures, not practice veterinary medicine. But when animal lives are at risk, training takes over. The story made veterinary journals and zoo industry publications, but Dorothy Sullivan didn't seek publicity or recognition. She accepted the zoo's offer to return to veterinary practice as senior consulting veterinarian, but continued working closely with custodial staff to ensure that animal observation remained comprehensive and thorough. Because she'd learned that the most important veterinary insights sometimes come from the people who spend the most time with the animals, regardless of their job titles or educational credentials. Dr. Sullivan continued serving Riverside Zoo until she was 80, training young veterinarians in the subtle art of recognizing disease patterns before they became obvious, and teaching animal care professionals that expertise can be found in the most unexpected places. Because true knowledge doesn't announce itself with degrees or titles, it just quietly goes about the business of saving lives, one animal at a time.